Hi, everybody. I am so excited to finally be able to introduce someone who I've had plenty of conversations with. He's an amazing friend of mine. I've been connected with him for a while, and I think I've talked about having him on the podcast forever. But now we're finally making it happen. Everybody, please give a warm welcome wherever you are, in your car, listening at home, on a run, doing what you're doing, to Scott Garber. Scott, what's going on, man?
Man, Keegan, my man, you're going to make me blush. Hopefully this is just an audio tune here. No, I appreciate the intro. It is long overdue. We've had so many conversations. We've met in person in this COVID world. And it was just time to get on and talk about what's going on in the world and take a look back at what we've done and evaluate how we're going to move forward. So super excited to be here.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know when this is getting recorded, I mean, this is potentially the best nightcap that I could have ever asked for on my birthday, September 2nd. I had an amazing time with my family. It's nighttime, late night here. And I couldn't have asked for a better way to really bring the night to a close, is having a conversation about things that are heavy, right? I mean, for some people they're heavy, but they're really, based around self-consciousness and self-awareness and taking a deeper look at yourself, because it's one of the things that a lot of people do when their birthday comes around. They start to get a little introspective and they think about, how they think about life, what they want to come next. And we had talked earlier today, and you had brought up an amazing topic that we are going to dive into that I think is perfect for a day like today, because I've been taking some inventory of my own life, looking on this past year and looking forward ahead with some projects and fun things that I have coming up. But before we dive into that, I kind of want to set a little bit of a red carpet, the beginning of the red carpet out for you, and give you a moment to really just let everybody here know who you are and kind of, where your domain resides today in the work that you do.
Ooh, boy, how long do we have? Well, first off, happy birthday, man. Like, I mean, what a treat, what an honor. I don't know. This is fun, something you don't get to do every single day. So a little bit about me. I am an athlete through and through, and I never wanted to hang up the cleats. And so as I transitioned into my professional world, I tried to figure out this way to flourish on the business side and marry it with my passion as being an athlete, being in the sports world. Got chewed up and spit up out of South Alabama. So that was a really cool place to start my career. I like to tell everyone that's where I got my first taste of entrepreneurship. So, South Alabama, when in 2009 was just piles of dirt, a bunch of coaches that came together with this vision of building a program from the ground up. And, through recruiting, trials and tribulations, which we'll get into in later episodes, I landed there. I got this opportunity to go ahead, earn a 5-year scholarship, play all throughout the SEC, the ACC, take South Alabama into a full-fledged Sun Belt program. And then, it was just this incredible moment of life that really set the foundation of where I was going to go, moving forward. Got chewed up and spit out of the game. And Keegan, as you know, I'm passionate about the athlete's transition, right? Like, it's really cool when we have the brand underneath us or behind us. And then you have this moment where you step out into the real world and you're just this person again, right? And so, I took some licks and really cut my teeth in the sales world, and then got this opportunity to get back into sports, but through a technology lane. So I always saw technology as, where we're going. Social media was, heavily introduced when I was playing, at the college level. Twitter came about, and LinkedIn and Facebook. Facebook was earlier. I'm not that old.
What are you, 40, 45, something like that?
Damn.
No, you're just older than he's barely older than I am. I turned 29 today, and Scott is in his young 30s.
Hold on one second. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Gotta take the headphones off. I don't know. They started clicking.
All good.
So came out of South Alabama, got on with this recruiting platform, and Keegan went head first. It was another startup. So took a lot of the learned experiences from South, brought them into this world. And then had a really amazing ride. We ended up getting acquired by a Jerry Jones backed venture. And, I ended up meeting my wife at this company, right? So that added a whole new dynamic to work. Now I was starting to balance, who am I as a person? How do I marry this with my professional journey? Fast forward a little bit. We both were collegiate athletes. We both went right into the workforce, and we sort of took a step back. I think this is going to set the stage for what we're going to talk about tonight. So we went on a 20,000-mile road trip, so we looked at each other and we said, there's more to life than what we're doing. And we were chasing the dream and we were having success, or at least what we thought was success. And it wasn't really scratching the itch of what we wanted and desired as humans. So we did a bold move. We were living in downtown Denver. We put everything that could fit into a storage unit. We put it in there. We sold the rest of it. And we went off the grid for 4.5 months. We did 20,000 miles, did an amazing trek across the United States, got engaged in Yellowstone National Park. And the whole time we didn't have our cell phones on. We were completely present. We were right where our feet were, and just had some revelations about what we want from the rest of this journey. And, I think tonight is going to be so special, Keegan. If you're comfortable with this, I'm just going to bring us right into the topic. But we were talking earlier, and the question came up: is the way that we define successful? And it's been on my mind. I brought it up to Keegan, and he's like, man, I couldn't think of a better way to spend my birthday than to talk about this. So I couldn't be more excited to be here. I think it's going to be an amazing time just to unpack this modern day version of success and really take a look inward and say, is it scratching the itches? Are you really fulfilling your purpose? And that's ultimately what we talk about. So yeah, let's have some fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a few things that we can dive into here and kind of peel this back layer by layer so that we can ultimately come to a place where, I mean, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, however you're engaging with any of this stuff, first off, we appreciate you taking any time to listen to this conversation, because Scott and I, after him saying what he is, obviously we're both collegiate athletes. He was a punter in college. I was a long snapper in college. So we have this like amazing synergy between us that really connected us when we first had, conversations together, and we talked about that. But also Scott is all in on athletes who are transitioning out of sports, helping them have successful lives afterwards. And he also helps athletes in the game monetize their name, image, and likeness now that that's come out, right? So you help so many athletes see opportunities within the world around them, whether it's business or branding or all these different things. And obviously I work on the performance mindset piece of it in order for them to show up and be optimal when they find those opportunities, or as they're creating those opportunities, in order to get the biggest and most bang for their buck in every single thing that they do. So there's this amazing yin and yang, really, that we come together with this handshake that we have. Now, within that, getting onto kind of the first thing, I think we have to define maybe what success means to us, because we've spent some time ourselves defining what success looks like in our own world. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it first. How have you really now, and I'll say this, I'm going to start not by asking you to really define success, but how did you approach defining success?
Yeah. Wow. So I think we got to start with the dictionary definition of success. So it's the accomplishment of an aim or purpose.
Okay.
Think about that, right? So there's 8 words there, right? The accomplishment of an aim or purpose. So success to me has sort of been this elusive target. It's been very sometimes defined, but never really defined by me. And as I started to come into my adult, I really found that how I was shaping success didn't necessarily line up with how society was defining success. And I found myself in these really weird conundrums. And if I can use an analogy, it's almost like taking a square peg, trying to cram it in a round hole. Now, it can happen, right? If you jam hard enough, it can happen. But after jamming for a while, I was like, this just doesn't make sense. And so I had to take a look inward And I think the defining moment for me was when it was bigger than Scott. I'm so curious, but I found success when I was able to take what I could digest or learn and give it back to someone.
Mm.
So this modern mantra that I've been using for success is the ability to reach one and teach one. And what this does, Keegan, is it keeps me true on both sides of the fence. I have to stay curious and hungry to learn, to absorb, to digest. And then I have to process that in order to be able to feed it downstream to go ahead and rise all the boats in the harbor with the tide. And so it's been a really fun equation of success as I've started to grow into it. And the amount of ripple effects that has, I think, is where I'm starting to feel the success at scale. So that'll scratch the surface for you there, Bubba.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the big things that I took a note down here is your definition of success, or how you found it, is within action. It's in doing, and it's not necessarily a noun for anything, right? Like so many people, because you brought up like that dictionary definition of success, and it's, being able to accomplish an aim or a purpose. And that's something where when you think about aim and purpose, it is something specific that you're trying to reach. It's a result that you're trying to achieve. And some people take that in a weird way, where they think of the way that they're conditioned to think about success is usually in the form of nouns, right? You think of people with certain titles. You think of people who have certain things, homes, companies, money, or certain relationships. They think of success as this thing rather than a verb, right? And the way that you described it there was exactly a verb: reach one and teach one, which calls you into a place of action, which that calling, that verb, is actually its purpose within itself, because a noun by itself can't do anything. There is no purpose to it.
Yep.
But it's only when you put that verb behind what you're doing, behind who you are, behind that noun, when you have a verb and a noun, that's when you can actually achieve something. Is that like, obviously I want to hear what that means to you, because that's how I perceived what you just said.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, it's I heard this saying a couple of days ago that success is a continuum, right? So it's really all, there's not like a destination for success, right? It's just about the journey, because we're continually evolving, right? And so I think there has to be a verb side of this definition, right? Because you have to be actively in this game, in some game, in something that you're doing as a human that's going to stretch you maybe out of your comfort zone, that's going to push you outside of your boundaries to feel this, right? And along that path to success, you're going to taste failure, right? And I think that's the yin and yang that we talk about. And so when I was always enamored with this, and I want your opinion before you actually got in the coaching side. I would hear all these terms about entrepreneurs love failure. Well, that was really counterintuitive to growing up, right? Like you are practicing, and we'll use football as an example. You try and practice for perfection, right? You try and practice to eliminate these mistakes. And then you hear entrepreneurs saying, I strive to fail quick. I strive to fail often, and learn from that. And so that was a really interesting thing for me to dissect. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, growing up, when you do something wrong, especially as an athlete, you understand immediately that you've done something wrong because you receive feedback real quick. And there's this, and before I was somebody who now understands that when I receive feedback, it makes me better. I used to think if I got feedback, it means I'm less than. And so there was this conditioning that I had where failure meant I wasn't keeping pace, or I wasn't pushing forward, that every time I failed, it was actually me getting lapped on the track of life or sport. And so there was this conditioning with all of it. And I think there's a lot of people who still deal with that, where they receive some form of criticism, or they receive something that makes them feel anything short of the goal that they've set, the expectation that they've set. And suddenly it's like their whole world implodes. They go into a place where they get, either pissed off or they're trying to figure out, who they are, and they start questioning everything, and they gaslight themselves. And in doing so, everybody else is like, I don't want anything to do with you, man. And so I was in that place a lot. And I didn't realize that my definition of certain words weighed so heavy in everything that was a part of my life, such as failure. I mean, for me, I had to change that definition of failure in order for me to become more successful. And for me, my definition of success so when I graduated college, and this was when I had like this moment of wisdom, and because after graduating, I graduated college and anybody listening to this or who knows me knows this story. I graduated college and had no job offers. And I had just recently, finished an internship that I thought was going to turn into a position, and it didn't. And I was part of the 2% in the lead school of business at the University of Colorado who didn't get placed in a job coming out of school. I was part of the 2%, and I was tutoring people at lead school of business. I was a smart kid, and I had a lot of intrinsic skills that put me in a position where I thought I should be doing something. I set an expectation, and I was part of the 2% that wasn't. And when I was being asked afterwards, at graduation lunch and stuff like that, people would come up and they'd ask, like, so what are you going to do now? And because I didn't have a job in mind, I wasn't going to sit there and say, I don't know. What came out of me was, I'm figuring out what that's going to be, but I know that I'm going to find success by being someone who helps other people find success. And that wound up being something I didn't realize at the time would actually drive a massive chunk of my life that has brought me to where I am right now. And that became my full-fledged definition of success. Is success for me is being the person who helps other people find success. Because and to me, that means becoming the person who provides value, and not just value, because value is a blanket statement. Understanding and connecting with somebody and understanding what's valuable to them, and then providing that value to them so that they can go and be successful. And in turn, I will naturally be finding success, because that's how the free market works. If you provide a value, then you'll be taken care of, which I have been. And so,
isn't that something? I mean, that to me is like the foundation of a community, right? It's like, it's just, it's to lift and empower people. And I think what's interesting is that's almost counterintuitive to what you experience growing up, right? You're always constantly being pushed down or, facing adversity. So, I mean, when you have this helping hand reach out, and what's really interesting, and this has been cool, like as we've gotten to know each other, you really embrace the individual's term of success or definition of success. It's not prescriptive. And I think that's where we sort of got like in this like weird pattern. And I don't know, I can only speak for the time that I've been alive and, the history that I understand. So we'll keep it here in America, but we started to define success in these materialistic ways, or in these ways that were almost like non-human. And I know that sounds really crazy to say out loud, but we thought like we could mask all of these feelings that we have through success that we create, only to find out that that does not satisfy the itch of what the true definition of success is, right? And so I think it's really interesting. The word evolve has to run in parallel with this modern day, or not even modern, just the definition of success, right? Because I think it's constantly changing. The target is constantly moving. So you have to be nimble. You have to be agile, I believe, in order to stay successful, not to become successful. I think you can find your lane, but if you cement in one ideology, or if you cement in one track, I think it really limits perspective of this wider, more broad definition of success because I think that purpose can be either very narrow or it can be very broad. You get to define that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think so. One thing I just wrote down that I pulled out from what you said there right at the end with like, essentially you need to be agile and you need to be able to move around. Like nouns move when you try and go for right now, if I'm sitting here saying, I think $1 million is a lot of money, right? Like if right now that's what I think, and I'm like, I just need to make $1 million and I'll be happy. By the time I probably reach $1 million, what $1 million can do for me will be different when I reach that point than what I'm thinking right now. Same thing for when you're like, you know what, I want to save up and I will be successful if I have the right technology and therefore I want the latest iPhone. Well, everybody knows you go and buy the latest iPhone and by the time you buy it, the next one is already being rumored. And you're just like, what? Right? Like when you go for nouns, the value of an established thing right now is going to change with every minute. And so it's a moving target. So when you come up with success, that's in contradiction of success, which is finding aim. When you aim at something, you're aiming at something specific and something that's not moving. You have a target that you're trying to hit. When you go after nouns, persons, places, things, they are moving targets. Why? Because people grow, people change. It's human nature. Places, the value of places change. The place in which you might do stuff changes. The place in which you thought you might like changes. Things depreciate. Things change all the time. The whole entire world is based around creating new things so that the current things can become obsolete. They all are moving targets that by the time you hit them, they're not worth anything. So the transition that comes from that I think I would love to be able to dive into is making this switch from aiming for things and defining success based off of things to defining success based off of behaviors. So let me and hear me out, everybody. When you picture your ideal self, I don't care if you're driving, don't do this. Just imagine it. But go ahead and close your eyes for a moment. If you're listening to this, whatever, and just picture something successful for yourself. You're accepting an award or you're making a speech or you're doing something. All that sounds great. Or even you're driving a really cool car and you're showing up at a gala and all these other things. And you know you are successful based off of your lifestyle. Now think about what you do when you wake up. Are you someone who sleeps in? Are you someone who wakes up and is groggy in the morning? Are you someone who eats a terrible breakfast? Are you somebody who doesn't plan their day? Most likely no. The things you probably imagine for yourself is someone who wakes up and wants to get into action. You're probably someone who sees yourself waking up and you're starting to work out. You then plan your day. You're part of the 5 a.m. crew type of thing. You see yourself making big decisions. You see yourself being a kind individual. These are all behaviors. You envision when you just roll the tape back a little bit. The only thing that's there is disciplines and behaviors.
So I have to chime in here first.
Please.
So I'm going to go back on the personal side here, but I think this is applicable to a lot of people. When I came out thinking about success, I thought about everything that I could go out into the world and control. And I learned that I can't control hardly anything. There's so much that's out of your control as a human being. So then you have this inflection point where you go and you push outward and you take everything that you feel and you try and scratch that itch by going external to those nouns, those things, those places, those material things. And we think that's going to solve the problems and those voices that you hear inside. This is a crass term, but I think everyone will resonate with it. In order to truly start to define success, you have to sit in your own shit. You have to look in the mirror. You have to address those little voices that both come from nature and nurture. Because the moment you start embracing those little voices, you become your own human. And you realize that you don't have to go outward to define success. Suddenly the equation flips, and now you get to go inward to start to define success. And Keegan, you'll shake your head 10 times over to this. The more you go inward, the more of the journey becomes about you. Oh my goodness, the amount of output goes through the roof because you're no longer faking it. You can be authentic. And it doesn't matter if it's you get to define success, but when you put out an energy that is authentic, that is real, that you're not trying to supplement or disguise these voices through outwardly successful metrics, that, my friend, was the game changer. And I got that perspective when we stepped outside of the bubble of which I was taught what success looked like. When you're standing in nature, when you had me close my eyes right there, success, I envisioned being on top of a mountain. My mind didn't go to a car. My mind didn't go to a dollar amount. I was like, man, so I look at Long's Peak out of my living room. And it is a goal of mine before we leave Estes Park to summit Long's Peak. It's 14,500 feet above sea level. It's a monster. And it's so neat to be able to balance perspective with, hey, I'm still successful by the society's norms. I'm still able to plug in and get it done, and balance that with what I, Scott Garber, define as success.
Yeah.
And that's when the culmination comes together and you can do some really powerful, impactful things in this world.
Absolutely. And I think so that example right there for people who are trying to sit there and think to themselves, you know what, this is still too much for me. I don't know exactly how I'm going to define success for myself. I think we can use that example. So you want to summit Long's Peak. For you, success in that manner is standing on top of that mountain, right? And it's not like just climbing the mountain. It's becoming the person who naturally would summit Long's Peak.
And it's the process to get to Long's Peak.
Exactly. So, and we're on the exact same page there. It's not about sitting there and saying, success is only being on top of that, on top of the mountain. Yeah, it's a cool metric to be able, it's a benchmark. It's a great story. Be like, I got to be on top of this, but it's everything before that moment that actually makes you successful. Because you could train and become the person who would naturally be able to summit Long's Peak easily. And then the work is done. And then you simply enjoy the ride because there's discipline and there's all these different things that you need to implement in your own world in order to make that possible. And therefore, when you stand on top of Long's Peak, it is simply a reflection of the man that you are and the disciplines that you put into action. And it actually, I was a part of a panel talking about what makes people successful working with a coach on Clubhouse not too long ago. And I actually did a part 1 episode of, covering some of that stuff last episode. One of the things that I called out that I thought was really interesting, because you talked about like, you have to look inwards. And then you realize life is all about really you. It seems selfish, but your life is you because you create the world around you, because you choose how you look at the world around you. You choose how things go. And this, I don't even know if it's a quote because I just wrote it and I don't know if it's from anybody.
It's about to be.
So quoted by me. I put as one of the biggest things for when you look inward is understanding that life as we live it is a reflection of ourselves in all ways. Breaking that down because it's a little heady. Your relationship with
Hold
anybody.
on, say that one more time. Say it one more time.
Let's start there. Life as we live it is a reflection of ourselves in all ways.
I love that.
It's a little heady, like I said, but think of it this way. If your relationship with somebody else, maybe it's a significant other, is on the rocks, but you yourself are somebody in the relationship who is also on the rocks internally, then your relationship is a reflection of that. Maybe there's a certain friendship where there's somebody who is very judgmental of you, and you don't want to talk to them because you're afraid of being judged. And then you realize that that person is simply reflecting back to you the fact that you are self-judgmental, and so are they. And therefore, they're projecting in order to feel like they don't have to judge themselves, because you say something and they try and knock you down a peg or something like that because it makes them feel bad. But you yourself say something cool about yourself because you're also your own worst critic. I've been there. So it's and that relationship is an exact mirror. And so a lot of people say, well, this person, I wish they wouldn't do this, or I wish they wouldn't do that. Well, you have a common denominator. It's the fact that you both are your harshest critics, and you both want validation that you're on the right path. And therefore, you're willing to do whatever it takes in order to get that validation. And you might do it in a way that might be a little bit toxic. Same thing with money. If you are somebody who, we can talk about nouns too. If you think looking at your bank account is scary, then you're probably the kind of person who's not making great money. If you're the kind of person who wakes up and you're like, I love looking at my bank account, then you probably have a very healthy financial situation. Everything is a reflection of the way that you interpret it. Doesn't matter what it is. So that's kind of what that means. But you were talking about obviously looking inwards. Now, as people are looking inwards, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, I've talked about behaviors, or instead of an ideal lifestyle that you want to have, an ideal set of behaviors you'd want to have. How would you recommend that certain people take time to actually look in the mirror and say, what does success mean to me? And do I like it?
Yeah. So I think one of the things, I'm going to go back to the summiting Long's Peak example for this. So I think there's this moment of you become almost enthralled with the process to do something that you've put out to do. And that is all internal, right? This is whether you express it through external things, or there is a drive in the notion of success that is internal. Something's fueling it, right? And I think that what bothers me about modern success is when you hit that goal or that purpose, for what you aim for, we are so quick to go ahead and go right on to the next one. So success, to me, I think has to be in seasons. I think we look at success in this continuum, and there's this idea or this phenomenon of burnout. I don't think you can be successful all the time. It can't be summer all the time. You need the winter. And so yes. I think that there are seasons of success. And I go back to this when it goes internal, you know that calendar, right? You can understand, and I'm not saying you can have control of it, because there's a lot of external factors when you define success with the ability to reach one and teach one. However, you can find success in the process every single time. So it might not always be the big success. It might not always be hitting the big purpose, but I think along the way, you'll be able to satisfy yourself if you understand what makes you successful in the seasons when it's not success. I hope that makes sense. I know that's a little wordy, but I think that's the true essence of this is when you hit your goal, you have to celebrate. You have to take time and embrace this. And I'm going to use an example that has just stuck with me. I was fortunate enough to be at an event with Dick Vermeil. And Dick was talking, about his coaching career. And I mean, for everyone listening who doesn't know, he's just a legendary Hall of Fame Super Bowl coach. And he was talking about his time. He was talking about his time. Was with the Eagles. And he said, it was season after season, Cowboys, they beat us in the divisional playoffs all the time, right? It was like 4 years in a row it happened. And he said it became this fixation to beat the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Didn't matter when, didn't matter how, we had to do it. That was success for him. He lived, he ate, he breathed, beating the Cowboys. So then the day comes, he beats the Cowboys. They played this game, they beat the Cowboys, and he said, I got on the bus, and before the bus left the parking lot, I was on to the next game. Think about that. You fixated over this for years, and you got there, and now all of a sudden, boom, we're on to the next one. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. The amount of time and effort and energy that goes into achieving this specific purpose that we aim for, why do we not give ourselves the equal amount of time to celebrate and embrace? And so this has always been my struggle with capitalism as we know it today. The cycles are so fast, it never gives you a chance to breathe success because you're always informed about something bigger, faster, stronger, better. Well, that to me is the definition of living on a hamster wheel. So if you let society as we live in it today define success, you will never get there. Take a step off the hamster wheel and figure out who you are. Figure out how you get those little incremental wins along the journey. And I think you can find and taste success. And I think that's something that we need to call out for anyone listening. Shut your eyes. And when is the last time you truly tasted success? And I'll challenge, if you don't have a definition of success, then you've never fucking tasted it.
Yeah. And anybody who's ever read a Tim Grover book, Winning, which I loved, Winning, and then From Good to Great to Relentless, both amazing. You know that the one thing that remains consistent in all of it is that winning and success is a cold-hearted bitch. You win the NBA championship to get 3 minutes in the chair with success when you have your moment, and the chair is rusty and uncomfortable, and then success stands up and says, go try again. And you get 5 minutes with it. Now, in the thing with that goes right hand in hand with what you're saying. When you fixate on one thing for so long, and then you get there, you realize you hit it, and you're just like, what's next?
And also, what did I miss along the way? So how narrow is my view of success now because I've been fixated on one thing? And I'm not saying that that's good. I'm not saying that it's bad.
Yeah.
You get to define that. But I don't think that the gold standard of success has to be winning multiple championships.
Yeah.
Because I think what it takes to get there is not balanced. And that's what I want to finish up on when talking about success. Is I think that this world, if you look at any ecosystem, if you look at any habitat, when it's out of balance, really weird things happen. I think success is the same thing. So it is this continuum, and it will always be going. But when you step off the hamster wheel, I think that if you come back on and are able to achieve balance by contributing and learning while also fulfilling what makes you feel successful, well, now you start to find holistic success.
Yes.
And it's not just one lane, Keegan. Now it opens up to a 4-lane highway and you can go back and forth. You're not going to run into oncoming traffic. You have 4 lanes to now do whatever you want.
And all those lanes take you to the same destination that you're ultimately aiming for, right? Yeah. And for me, like, obviously Scott and I are not pooping on winning an NBA championship, right? Like, if you win as many as MJ, Kobe, great athletes, LeBron, Shaq, all these other guys, they're legends, right? And we're not taking anything away from them. We're saying that when you only fixate on winning an NBA championship, you will ultimately wind up either even or potentially losing, because there's so much you missed out on. You can create more than one way to win in everything that you do, and thus giving yourself more opportunity to be able to say, hey, winning an NBA championship would be great, but what if I also strive to become this type of person? What if I also decided to do this with my career and my stature? What if I also chose to fulfill myself in this other way? What if I also chose to give to somebody and take the lessons I've learned from this journey and teach them to somebody else? Now you're winning all the time and you're celebrating.
I have to chime in though.
Do it.
Because in order to be the greats and the way they define success, it's not balanced. And I don't hate on that, because that is how they define success. What I dislike is that we prop that up as success for all of society.
Yes.
That is not the gold standard of success. It is a version of success.
It's their version of success.
Exactly. And you get rewarded for it, but you can be. And we always use the sport, but there's people that are obsessed with things that, baking or knitting, or it doesn't matter, right? Like, if you become so laser focused, politics, right? You get sucked into this vacuum of success. And I just like to challenge as a human to say, can we open that up? Can we redefine what modern success looks like? Because what we're finding is, with that single track mentality of success, well, now there's a lot of mental health problems that are starting to arise in this quote unquote successful population. Well, come on now, what is the goal of life, right? And so that's where everyone gets to define it for themselves. And so so it is so cool to sit back and say, you get to define success however you want. But one of the key ingredients to that recipe is perspective. And so the ability for me and you to communicate how we define success may open someone's, eyes or horizon to say, well, damn, I am feeling a little fucked up in the head right now. Maybe I can change one ingredient in my success recipe and it might open it up. You never know, right? And so at the end of the day, this is all about perspective. And the more you're able to absorb and digest, the broader you will be, the broader that definition will be. And so strike a balance in there in some aspect of life. And I think you'll find these moments of success along the way to wherever we're going. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a few closing thoughts, and then I want to turn it over to you to really bring us home with a few things. Mm-hmm. A couple of things here. One, in order to be successful, you have to change your definition of failure. And failure, which Scott, you and I have talked about, the best running backs, because we use a sports analogy, fall forward. They get another yard even though the play ends. So it's one of those things where when you understand how to fall forward, you naturally continue to gain ground. And if you have the mindset that every time you run into a bit of a roadblock or a brick wall or a hurdle or whatever you want to call it, when you think of it as I'm falling forward rather than losing ground, then it naturally changes the way that you're going to approach the situation. And instead of going into a downward spiral, you might go into planning mode. So change the way that you think about how you perceive a challenge or something like that. And the other piece of challenge that I'll put in here is, and this is something I taught myself, or I realized about myself after a while when I felt like I was running into brick wall after brick wall. And I wrote this down because something you said completely sparked it. Challenges are intensive lessons to learn specific tools to help you move forward into the next phase of life. I firmly believe that whatever's lying ahead of you has prerequisites. Think of it as you can't move on to your 3,000 level class without first completing your 1,000 and 2,000 level class with passing grades. And therefore, you have the criteria met in order for the 3,000 level course to accept you. When you run into challenges, it is taking what should have taken you a year that you just so happen to not pick up on over the course of a year. Maybe you ignored it. Maybe you didn't realize it. And it says, well, phase 2 or this next phase of your life starts 3 months from now. So we got it. Life sits there and says, we have to make you ready for it because it's coming. So therefore, boom, you get hit with a challenge. You think your world's ending in it, whatever. But it's just that the lesson you're supposed to learn is now right in front of your face, so that you have to pay attention and you have to cram that course, because your next phase of life isn't waiting for anything. It's coming into your life whether you're ready or not. And life will do everything it's supposed to in order to try and make you as ready as you can. So anytime a challenge comes in, it is simply an intensive learning session for you to pick up the tools needed to be successful in the next phase of life. A couple other things. When you're thinking about success and you want to define it, think about what we talked about earlier. Envision the lifestyle that you want, and then rewind the tape. What are the disciplines? What are the behaviors? What are the attitudes that you bring to the table as that person who has that lifestyle? And therefore, what do you need to do today in order to become that person, so that lifestyle becomes something that simply reflects the person you are? I want to open it up to Scott for a couple of, one, I want to hear your closing remarks for this conversation. And two, how can people find you? How can people follow what you're doing and the exciting person that you are and connect with you? And obviously you'll be on here plenty more.
Yeah. So I have two closing thoughts. I want to start first by saying, when I met Keegan, we met online, through Miriam Glez, I believe. And, we were connected. And the first conversation we had was all about this idea that Keegan was manifesting around creating a tribe where men could be men, but in a full spectrum, from we're going to lift weights and the highly testosterone driven men to the man, life just slapped me in the face and I just need to cry. And he laid this foundation of, you need people around you to create this tribe, because life is really hard and life is really difficult when you're going through it by yourself. So that's going to lead me to my next point, which is success leaves clues. And it sort of goes back to the reflection moment that you talked about earlier. You will find success anywhere in society based on what you're looking for. And what you look for is what you attract. And what you attract is the tribe that you ride with. If you are curious about your level of success, look at the people around you. Look at the decisions that you make. If you're happy and comfortable and that fits within the confines of your definitions of success, keep evolving. If you don't like that, if you don't like the people that you're around, if you find negativity around you, evaluate your tribe. And I think that starts with evaluating yourself, and then you get to go rebuild. So because this game is every day that we have a breath, you have the ability to go ahead and change. You have the ability to take control of your breath. You have the ability to do little incremental things that can manifest into something big, just like what Keegan had this vision of almost a year ago now. And this is multiplying. So it's really neat to be on your 29th birthday talking about this concept that you had that almost seemed elusive in the world that we lived in. And slowly but surely, success continued to manifest. And now we have a tribe of like-minded, diverse individuals that all sort of share this same vision of what success is. And it's all to make you, the listener, a little bit better than when you started listening to us. So, dude, I appreciate the platform. This has been an absolute blast. If you guys want to find me, I'm all over LinkedIn. I mean, that's my platform of choice. LinkedIn / Scott Garber 40, I think it is. Or just type in Scott Garber, you'll find me. Or reach out to Keegan, reach out to myself. My email is, I'm not dropping my email on here. Reach out to Keegan. He'll give it to you. Hit me up on LinkedIn. But man, we'll be back on here more talking about these concepts and, look forward to any further conversations with anyone listening.
Absolutely. And there is, a little bit of a project that we've been working on that at some point is going to be released, where we have conversations on plenty of other topics that are a little bit less mindset related, a little bit more life-based related, especially with our experience throughout life and as athletes. And so that'll come out at some point. We've been working on that in the background. And really, it's been an amazing thing for Scott and I to be able to have these conversations with each other, and now be able to have this conversation is just a little bit of a different flavor of the stuff that we normally do. So I'm absolutely going to have Scott on here more and more, not only because he's a great sounding board, but two, it allows me to not have to sit here and continuously just keep coming up with, content and having a script for myself, because I can play off you. And so we'll come on here and we'll throw around topics, especially as they come around, because we're both athletes. And so and we're both collegiate football athletes. And so with the college football season coming up, we're going to be keeping an eye out for things that start happening, especially in the athletic space, that we can bring on here as great topics that can bring a lot of value to people, no matter who you are. But they're just things that we see on television or we see on the news as they pertain to sports, because everybody pays attention to that stuff. So, Scott, I love you, man. I appreciate you. This has been
birthday,
incredible.
buddy.
Thank you. Thank you for the nightcap.
Yeah, boy.